Rousseau, we find that for the first time in modern time, a criticism of the liberal notion of freedom as absence of restraint and on choice come into picture, because he argued that simply by removing the impediments from human life, external impediments, and also by giving the choice in principle would not ensure freedom. That requires addressing the major social conditions and those conditions which are responsible for giving birth to inequality. Now, Rousseau is a complex thinker who has been criticized also for sacrificing freedom of individual at the altar of general will, because the way Rousseau theorized general will and the way he defined freedom as obedience to the law which we prescribe to ourselves, that is prescribed by general will. Many critics have pointed out that Rousseau's general will was nothing but Leviathan head chopped off. It was like Hobbes's authoritarian Leviathan. The only thing was that the head was not there. It was not recognizable, it was indefinite, but nonetheless the structure was the same. So, therefore, Rousseau has been criticized on that count, and later on we can also see that Rousseau has also been clubbed with many many scholars, thinkers who are proponents of idealist school like Hegel, Beauchamp and many others. So, therefore, that is one thing to be remembered, but nonetheless Rousseau was and continues to be beacon of light for freedom, so for freedom discourse in modern time. Another Republican thinker who has been the contemporary, one can say, because she died in 70s, Hannah Arendt, an Austrian who fled to United States of America, was subjected to fascist terror and was basically victim of fascist regime in Germany, in fact has reflected on this issue from the Republican point of view. And for Hannah Arendt, freedom is larger than liberty, and she makes a distinction between freedom and liberation. In fact, for Hannah Arendt, liberation is absence of restraint on individual rights to life, liberty and property, whereas freedom needs a republican polity for its enjoyment by the people. So, therefore, she is emphasizing the republican polity for enjoyment of freedom and believes that it has to be seen differently from liberation, which is absence of restraint. Now, Hannah Arendt contribution is significant from the point of view of republican take on freedom, because she was great advocate, or one can say, of republican ideas, and also admired the American Revolution, when she compared with the French Revolution, largely on account of giving birth to this republicanism, in modern times, the American Revolution. So, therefore, that is something important for Hannah Arendt. Now, this after republican notion of freedom, the second school or second conception on freedom is the liberal conception, and this is something very important, which is purely modern. If republican has some traces in ancient, liberal is purely the modern creation, and here we can see this tradition starting with the social contract theorists like Hobbes and Locke, about whom I just now referred when I was talking about Rousseau. In fact, more than Hobbes, it is Locke who is considered the high priest of liberalism. In fact, he is rather considered at times the father of liberalism, and along with Adam Smith, Ricardo and many other political economists, in fact they have provided the real backbone of liberal thought and liberal thinking. But along with Hobbes and Locke, two other names should also be mentioned. One is John Stuart Mill, another is Jeremy Bentham. John Stuart Mill in fact shared something with Bentham, because Bentham used to be the father, friend of his father James Mill, who himself was a utilitarian. Of course, John Stuart Mill broke from that utilitarian tradition to great extent, and therefore, basically J.S. Mill is in fact remembered for revising utilitarianism and providing this quality or dimension to this entire thought. But these four thinkers are important for liberal tradition, but that does not diminish the contribution of other important thinkers who can also be put under liberal tradition. Here I would like to mention Green. In fact, another important British thinker, about whom sometimes people scholars feel that he also belongs to the idealist tradition, but being a Britisher, in fact he is seen as a liberal thinker who emphasized the positive concept of freedom and positive state, and therefore the kind of foundation which was being laid earlier by John Stuart Mill, that tradition was taken forward. And in fact, one can say that later on Harold Laski, the famous book which he wrote, Grammar of Politics, where reflected extensively on rights and freedom, in fact took this tradition further. In fact this brought this entire positive connotation of freedom within the liberal framework. So therefore these are the important thinkers, but let us confine ourselves to Hobbes, Locke, Mill and Bentham. These four important names. The Bentham will come before J.S. Mill, because he happened to be the friend of his father James Mill. In fact, Hobbes, particularly the way he looked at this entire question of freedom as absence of impediment, is something very interesting, and that is something very central to this entire classical liberalism. Now this impediment for Hobbes is not the internal impediment in human beings, but impediment from outside, or hindrances or obstructions from outside. So therefore this external impediment, and the removal of this external impediment is freedom, and whosoever removes this external impediment can ensure freedom. And in that case, the way he has this entire social contract imagined, the hypothetical state of nature, the state of warfare, the cutthroat competition, and the kind of psychological analysis of human existence, that how human beings aspire for power, and and therefore they are self-interested. And therefore what happens, that this quest for power, unlimited power, leads to a kind of fear psychosis among human beings. So very interesting discussion of this entire state of nature in Hobbes. And therefore this freedom is basically in terms of removal of this impediment, and therefore he basically argued in favor of a very strong authoritarian state, that is form of that Leviathan, which will basically ensure this removal of this impediment. In fact, one thing is interesting to mention, see here, that there is no moral framework in Hobbes so far as this impediment is concerned. Particularly the impulse for survival is concerned. In fact, human beings have two impulses, impulse for survival, self-preservation, and for power, and therefore both lead to the kind of situation which ensues in the state of nature. Now this survival instinct of human beings, when Hobbes discusses, he doesn't make any reference to the moral dimension of this of choice, that whether human beings have a moral choice to exercise in terms of survival or not. For example, in order to survive, if someone is begging or someone is committing a robbery, and both are meant for self-preservation, in order to preserve himself or herself, whether that is to be endorsed or not, is it moral or not, these issues are not important for Hobbes, because for Hobbes internal impediment to freedom is not important at all. For example, if someone is begging, in fact he or she is begging because he or she is poor, that means the impediment lies within, that is poor, and poor because of the certain conditions in which he or she have been placed, or the robbery. So therefore this, or someone is lame, or someone is some other challenged people. So therefore these impediments are there also. What to do in society to take care of those internal impediments and external impediments. So internal impediment is as important as external for realization of freedom and realization of choice to live or survive. But for Hobbes it is only the external impediment which is important. Now when we come to Locke, in fact we can see that a new dimension is entering into this entire discourse on freedom, and that is the dimension of choice, which was absent in Hobbes. Hobbes basically, for self-preservation, no choice, somehow you have to manage to survive. whether you are begging or robbing, or you are committing a dacoity, or for that matter whatever unethical act you are indulging in, is perfectly fine so far you are surviving. So no choice dimension, but in Locke you get a choice dimension. So two important aspects of this liberal tradition on freedom, the absence of impediments and presence of choice, we can see coming through Hobbes and Locke. Now Locke, this choice dimension comes particularly in terms of a moral aspect of choice. In fact, choice has two aspects, the moral and the material. For example, if I have a choice, but whether I should make that choice or not has a moral connotation, whether it is ethical or unethical. And then there is a material dimension also to choice, whether the material conditions are ripe for me to exercise my choice or not. For example, if I have choices, but those choices are tied to certain conditionalities, that if I have to buy something, and there are many things which I can buy and choose, but the material dimension of choice will be that I should have money in my pocket to buy. So therefore there is a material aspect of this choice also. But in Locke what we find that this moral aspect is taken care of and addressed, but not the material. So therefore this moral aspect of choice comes into Locke through this law of nature, which is very important, because as we can recall that how Locke and his entire discourse on natural rights and natural law are very important in his entire thought. Now this choice of natural law, choice of this moral choice comes through law of nature, which is in Locke nothing but harm principle, that there is a law of nature and we have to obey the law of nature. Even the rights are also fruits of law of nature. And there is one law of this nature, that is the harm principle, that whatever you do, whatever you acquire, we should not harm others. His entire concept of property, which is so important for liberal thought, is also basically premised on this harm principle, because he put three conditionalities the way property is created. And as we should remember that there has not been a better thinker, liberal thinker, who has given a more effective and powerful theory of property than Locke, the Lever theory of property, that there is a commonwealth and there is a human power, and human beings mix their power, human power, with that commonwealth which is existing in as commons, and then you create something. And then he puts certain conditions that only if those conditions are met, then only that property can be considered legitimate. And one of the conditions which he puts is this the harm principle, that you should not harm anyone, or you should not produce something by mixing your labor in a manner that depletes that commonwealth, and number two, that also leads to something which harm the others, be it nature or for that matter anything else. So therefore this harm principle, which in him is the as part of law of nature, and the way he has looked at it is seen normally as a moral framework through which he looked at freedom, that even if one basically aspires for or has a quest for freedom, but then this moral constraint on this choice has to be exercised. So therefore this is something, a very important advancement over Hobbes, if we compare Hobbes and Locke, so far as the concept of freedom is concerned within liberal tradition. But one thing is to be seen here, that there is no reference of conditions as yet in Locke. So therefore till Locke in liberal tradition there was no recognition of external impediments to freedom, and also the conditional, the societal conditions as impediment to freedom, and therefore there was no recognition of this fact that for realizing choice or actualizing choice the conditions are important, that unless you are placed in a suitable conditions you cannot realize and actualize your choice. And this is the third dimension, this condition aspect which I mentioned earlier also was picked up by Rousseau, but he does not belong to this liberal tradition because of number of ideas which he advocated. So therefore this is how we can see the liberal tradition emerging with Hobbes and Locke, with absence of restraint and this choice as two important two principles behind this freedom. Now the two other thinkers who deserve some mention here, one is John Stuart Mill, another is Bentham. And as I mentioned that Mill happened to be the son of Bentham's friend James Mill, and in fact James Mill and Bentham in fact were the high priest of this entire school called utilitarianism. And Mill is credited for revising this utilitarianism, where he tried to bring in certain new dimensions in this utilitarian thinking. And one such dimension was that qualitative aspect, dignity aspect he brought in, not just pleasure, pain calculus through which this entire utilitarianism looked at freedom. In fact, Bentham's entire utilitarian calculus, as this famous statement, push, pain and poetry will have the same result, in fact, or greatest happiness or greatest number principle were revised by James Mill, John Stuart Mill. He said that push, pain and poetry argument is not valid, and that famous statement, a Socrates dissatisfied is better than a fool satisfied, testifies that that position which J.S. Mill upheld. So therefore, John Stuart Mill revised utilitarianism, and that particularly the two important aspects about Mill's thought are to be should be remembered. One is his idea of positive state and his idea of negative freedom. In fact, so far freedom is concerned, he remained within that liberal pantheon of thinkers who advocated negative liberty. In fact, to the extent that Mill went to the extent of saying that over one body and mind human beings are sovereign. In fact, to the extent of giving the right to experiment with one's life. Therefore, many people believe that John Stuart Mill, while championing freedom, gave the right to suicide also, that if one has a right to experiment with one's life. So therefore, that way he basically glamorized and glorified freedom. In fact, so far as the state is concerned, unlike other liberals who always wanted to shunt a state out of human life and society, J.S. Mill was ready to give some space to state intervention. And here he made a distinction between self-regarding and other-regarding action. That those actions of human beings which are self-regarding, which pertain to oneself, the state has no business to interfere. But those actions of human beings which basically pertain to others, which are going to impinge on others' life, state can make intervention. So therefore, he was ready to give some space for state action in human life through this distinction between self-regarding and other-regarding. Of course, the critics have basically pointed out that this distinction is meaningless, that it is very difficult to make such distinction in society, that which action is self-regarding and which action is other-regarding. So therefore, that is one thing. But so far as the Mill is concerned, he was a great champion of freedom. In fact, he wrote that book on liberty, which is considered a most important text of modern times so far as liberal take on freedom is concerned. In fact, he gave ample space in his writings and his ideas on freedom of expression, freedom of thought, freedom of conscience. In fact, freedom of expression to the extent that he said that if 99 people are of one view, only one person is of a different view, still that view should be respected, because of autonomy of individual and the sanctity of freedom of expression. And then of course, in fact, his argument was that no one knows that that one view which is a differing view may have some content of truth, and which may not be recognized now, but may eventually be understood and recognized. So therefore, freedom of expression should be protected, safeguarded and respected. So therefore, this is another important take on freedom, that is John Stuart Mill. Now, after looking at this liberal particularly take on this freedom, there are 2-3 other ideological strands on freedom. They should also be mentioned here before I move to this negative positive scale of this differentiation. And here I would like to mention the anarchists. And anarchists, in fact, a school of thought which exists between the liberals and the socialists. In certain matters, one can say that they are close to the socialists, but in certain matters they are very close to the liberals. In fact, if this dictum that the best government is which governs the least applies to liberals, perhaps this statement will be more applicable to the anarchists. The best government is which does not govern at all. Rather, in fact, they believe that a state is a unnecessary evil, unlike the liberals who believe that a state is a necessary evil but necessary due to the imperfection of human life. But anarchists were not even ready to concede it. That are totally uncalled for, unnecessary. In fact, Gandhi, who is considered a great champion of freedom as Swaraj, and therefore, in fact, this Swaraj, as I mentioned earlier, is more closer to this idea of holistic, totalistic, universal notion of freedom. In fact, he is also considered an anarchist, because for anarchists, authority and freedom cannot exist together. And this Gandhian utopia of Ram Raj, in fact, which was a stateless society, a decentralized order, in fact, the kind of Swaraj he talked about is very close to this entire anarchist take on freedom. And there have been many anarchists, in fact, in Western political thinking as well as in Eastern. For example, Kropotkin, Bakunin, the number of anarchist thinkers have been there. So therefore, one can say, for that, and Gandhi in Indian context is remembered as someone whose ideas and thought, were quite closer to this anarchist thinking. The second ideological stand on this freedom is the idealists. As I mentioned earlier, particularly in ancient time, the Greek period, there were some thinkers whose ideas are considered to be, belonging to that tradition. Particularly the way they looked at a state as an organic model and were ready to sacrifice individual freedom for the sake of community interest and the interest of the state. In fact, Plato's Republic is one such example. In modern time, Hegel is considered perhaps the most important voice so far as idealist thinking is concerned, when he declared that a state is march of God on the earth, and basically freedom is actualized only when basically this obedience to a state is basically complete. So therefore, this is perhaps the idealist position on freedom, and in fact Hegel and many others have been, and as I mentioned earlier, that sometimes Rousseau is criticized, particularly his view on general will, that he is closer to this idealist school so far as freedom is concerned, because he sacrifices individual freedom at the altar of this community interest or community structure, which is in form of general will. So therefore, this is the idealistic. The third important take is the socialists and the Marxists, and that is something also equally significant. In fact, I will turn to this Marxist and socialist one later. But before I turn to the Marxist and the socialist, let me turn to this second scale of this differentiation so far as freedom is concerned, or multiple conceptions of freedom, how they basically emerge because of this negative positive connotations. Now, if we look at the history of ideas in modern time in particular, thinkers are divided on this scale, and Isaiah Berlin in modern time, in recent times, in 20th century, is believed to have given a very powerful expression to this negative positive connotation, particularly his book Two Concepts of Liberty. And that was basically a lecture which he delivered in Oxford in 1967. It was published in 1967. That was the lecture which he delivered after he was appointed as professor in Oxford. That is a professorial lecture, and therefore in that he tries to highlight this distinction between negative and positive. But one thing is to be remembered, that in spite of a very strenuous effort which he makes to differentiate negative and positive, Berlin settles for a negative view of liberty and remains part of this liberal tradition. For Berlin, wider the area of non-interference, wider is the freedom, and therefore this is something which basically reminds us, or one can say that the echo of this classical liberalism comes through this statement of Berlin. In fact, for Berlin, poverty, disease, etc. cannot be called unfreedom. Because it is, if someone is poor or someone is suffering from disease, that does not mean he is free, because the unfreedom can only be, assessed when there is some obstruction or some hindrance from outside, or someone is interfering in your life. But if you are a poor, you are a diseased person, the problem lies with you. So therefore, that problem cannot be called a situation of unfreedom. Now, according to Berlin, this entire the wider the area of non-interference, the wider is of freedom. Now, Berlin also said that we should not confuse freedom with conditions of exercise. There are two different things, that whether the conditions are available for exercise of freedom or not, that is outside the purview of the entire discussion of freedom. Basically, only the non-interference is basically the defining framework of freedom. If someone is interfering your life, you are unfree. If you are being left totally free without any interference, then you should definitely feel that you are free. But if your conditions are not there in which you are exercising your choice or exercising your freedom, you should not blame others, rather you should blame yourself. It is a typical classical liberal argument, particularly the way the market ideologues have been justifying freedom and market mechanism. So, therefore, there is no relation of equality with justice in Berlin. In fact, it focuses on availability rather than exercise of freedom. That choices are available, but you are not being able to exercise the choice, that means the problem lies with you. It is not with the state, it is not with the society. In fact, Berlin's entire thing was colored by the misuse of positive liberty as it happened during the fascistic regime in Europe, and the dictators the way have been using and misusing this positive freedom. Now, in recent years we have seen that neoliberalism and the ideologues of neoliberalism have basically taken this entire discourse of negative liberty to higher pedestal. And here three names need to be mentioned: Hayek, Friedman and Nozick. Particularly the Nozick in recent years and Hayek and Friedman earlier in fact have been highlighting this tradition of negative liberty. In fact, with them we can see the revival of classical liberalism, of course with a difference, because classical liberalism also engaged with common good and common interest, but the neoliberals have not been showing much interest in common good and common and common interest. So, therefore, that is a difference. And in fact, the rolling back of the state and the market glorification of market mechanism, what today we are witnessing in name of globalization, all these things basically are part of this neoliberal discourse on freedom. Positive freedom, like negative freedom, unlike negative freedom, stands for self-realization and self-mastery, realization of potential, and here 2-3 names in recent years can be mentioned. One is John Rawls, particularly after the publication of his book Theory of Justice. In fact, Rawls, through his contract, a hypothetical contract, the way he argues for justice, and in that theory, he has given a lexical priority principle. Lexical is basically coming from lexicon, that is basically dictionary, that is A precedes B. So, therefore, this lexical priority principle, that liberty precedes equality and equality precedes difference. So, in his two principles of justice, he has talked about three things: liberty, equality and difference. Of course, because the paucity of time, it is not possible to go into the details about the Rawls's theory, which I will be doing later sometimes when the discussion of justice will happen. But here, he makes a lexical priority principle, but he prioritizes liberty like a true liberal. Liberty is lexical prior to equality and equality is prior to difference. So, therefore, this is Rawls. He agrees to make discrimination for justice, but any deviation from equality principle is allowed only when it helps marginal section of society, only when it maximizes the liberty of the totality. That means liberty is prior to equality, and this is what he means by justice. Now, another two thinkers are important to mention: Joseph Raz, who has criticized negative liberty in recent years. He says negative liberty of non-interference is totally bunkum. His liberalism is called perfectionist liberalism. For Raz, human autonomy requires a certain kind of community life created by the liberal government promoting value pluralism. And then John Gray, he also criticizes negative liberty because it lacks intrinsic value. Now, Marxism, as I mentioned, stands altogether different, because for Marx, free conscious activity is human species character, and how human being can realize that species character is freedom. An economic and philosophic manuscript is basically is a reflection on this idea of freedom. For him, freedom is recognition of necessity, and freedom begins when necessity ends. So, this is how we can see the various conceptions of freedom in political theory.